As I said in the email, it's been a week of discovery and challenges. Uh, in other words, we're all alive in the human experience. Um, Two key takeaways from the travel this week, in walking with you guys and learning how things are transpiring. Two of the things are the this kind of personalization of human emotional content, what I'm calling that, and also the losing our own balance in helping others on the journey. So those taking on the belief systems and automatic behaviors that we personalize and take on. We've talked a lot about taking on what isn't ours and how this shows up in our life. Um, the big picture is that there are waves of this through the ocean of collective human consciousness, and when we encounter them, we personalize them to our experience. It's automatic and a natural function because we attach this emotional content to a story of ours because it's the only reality we have, this individual sense of self, until we begin to move into a broader awareness of universal self or a Christ consciousness that definitely is glowing at the center of our core. Um, and we can begin to feel like it's all ours when we're identifying with this bio body here on this journey only. Um, so we can begin to feel like all of that we're sensing is ours when actually we all have our portion and we are sharing in this together. So, example of waves of shame that move through this ocean. Everyone experiences them, unless they're suffering from some personality pathology that disallows them from connecting to their own emotions or those of others. No compassion for self or others is a rampant disease and creates plenty of dis-ease. It's frighteningly evident in our government currently. It's even rampant in the current bizarro world Christian nationalist movement that ignores Christ's message of love, caring for others, and healing to bring a teaching of revenge, punishment, and separation, drawing on an Old Testament perspective where stoning someone to death was the solution for any number of transgressions. And by the way, it was a-okay to sell your daughter into slavery or kill your child for mouthing off. And they even have guidelines for that, how to know when to do that and how to do it properly. So, but I digress. When we do experience these waves, we personalize them. And especially shame wants us to believe we're alone. It wants us to hide so that it can grow. It argues that this will never end, you know. It argues that there's no hope. But the truth is, the world is nothing but change. And when we allow that kernel of loving hope that is the core of our connection to the whole of creation to come through, we're healing not just ourselves, but the collective. And we're doing what we came here to do in Earth School, bring that higher frequency of conscious light into the density and uplift it. So after the personalization piece there, the second part I mentioned was this balance in helping others, or losing our balance in helping others. And I thought about making these two separate topics, but then I realized how they come together. In wanting to help, we can really overextend and become enabling instead of getting to our real intention, which was to help someone thrive. That idea that it's really hard to let your kids trash their own tricycle, crash their tricycle, so they learn the dynamics of you can't go that fast and turn that sharp. It's tough to watch though, and So I learned this repeatedly in counseling individuals and families through substance abuse and other process addictions. The enabling mom, I don't understand. I feed him. He gets to play video games, and yeah, he's going to stay in your basement and do heroin all the time. Then it's just the way it works. But in our own families, outside of the severity of those kind of things, we learn that in our own families, we're rescuing someone from something, some emotional challenge, and trying to help actually deprives them of the opportunity to learn what they need to learn. And it can be awful to watch because sometimes they're attacking us in the process, or others. And it's a difficult balance for a parent, a sibling, or a child. And also, it's really another way of taking on what isn't ours, as I was talking about in the beginning. That is part of this whole field of education that we're engaged in here. So it's, at least it's not our portion. Of course, in families, there's no interaction that we don't have a part of. And recognizing what our part is and kind of applying that Ho'oponopono piece that we've talked about before too was a way, I guess you could say, a tool, a practice of disallowing that to own us and moving into that larger vibrational space of healing. So having said that, this piece about taking on what is others and what is ours and what we choose to do. Let me stop this share. That's been up there long enough. It's probably permanently imprinted on your psyche somewhere. But I like that image because it's the guy standing there with his vessel and it looks like this ocean, which is actually the whole ocean, and it's just has some crystal ball aspects to it that are interesting too. I wanted to read you a section of the book that's from the beginning when I first walked into my transformational experience. I'm going to say our transformational experience because I've shared so much of it with you, and that's what it was for anyway. I shared somewhat of what, when we first flew into Alaska, there was this experience of hitting what I'm going to call a karmic bubble. And I might read that part again at some point, because it's been polished somewhat from what I first shared with you. But there was an impact of sorts of me returning to Alaska and running into what was a karmic bubble of some unresolved lifting that I needed to do in this, checking some boxes on my blueprint in Earth School here. And that's what this transformational journey was about. And I just want to add maybe some clarity to how that unfolded and what I'm feeling about access to higher dimensional healing, and how I was kind of dragged into it. So here's where that begins. As we planned our summer visit to Alaska, I had jokingly told Marcia that I could show her all of the places I almost died. I never considered I'd be taking another pass at it. The tires of our black luxury BMW hissed smoothly across the wet pavement of the parking lot, arriving in style at the Seward Sea Life Center. We had rented a bit on the high end for the car since we planned some significant driving time on this trip. This milepost on our route greeted us under a multi-textured gray sky. Clouds at all altitudes. a big blanket of stratus clouds interrupted by wisps of cirrus clouds, all setting the stage for the smattering of nimbus, their dark promise of more water coming. The grayscale up there met the same tones in the water, only separated by a hazy silhouette of bluish mountains surrounding the bay. All of it reflected in the wet mirror of pavement as we slid into a parking space. Marcia had not been feeling very well at all, but was really being a trooper, as we had planned this for a long time, and we were both especially looking forward to this destination. She holds a fascination with wildlife, especially birds, and regularly converses with them. So her having never met one of the unusual-looking puffins, it led the parade of attractions here. I was also looking forward to sharing the unique Alaskan wildlife I had grown up with. I had my own memories of the puffins tracking our boat as it sped across the water. How they would fly alongside, perfectly matching our speed just inches above the surface like boxy little fighter jets in formation, making it look so easy. Since she was feeling drained as we walked in, I joked about pushing her in one of the wheelchairs available inside the front door. My joke was quickly diffused with some side-eye, and we proceeded in. The feeling in this place has always been very different from a zoo in that the inhabitants are rescues, not captives, and the big seals swimming endless circles in giant tank environments doesn't generate the same depression I can feel seeing captive animals in a zoo or entertainment venue like SeaWorld. It still can be a bit sad, like visiting a friend in the hospital. We completed our self-guided walk-through tour of the facility, but then backtracked to the octopus exhibit for another look. The solo inhabitant had been hiding previously, and I felt a beckoning. When we returned, we were the only people in the room, and I felt guided to put my hand on the tank, to feel the creature's presence. There was no immediate response, but as I gently immersed my awareness into the tank environment with a sense of beckoning and reassuring, the octopus came out into view. Tentatively at first, but then bringing along all his flowing arms behind him like a weightless dancer. He spread his arms wide and let himself settle to the bottom, and then gathered them again to bumble up the surface of the rocky hill in the exhibit. He continued and put on quite a show, just for the two of us. I could feel the sensory field of the octopus, and what I can only describe as the shape of its personality touched me. I was stepping into a pre-verbal, non-judgmental way of being aware with that fellow creature, as if tuning into that channel by invitation and him saying, "Try this on for size." This conjoined awareness also resonated memorably with a certain staleness. I just knew this was stemming from the lack of wild wonder in its captive life. It knew every millimeter of that contained space, which was not a natural state of being for the creature. It is built to explore, learn, and know much larger spaces. Not that it consciously thought about that, but it was more of an aspect, flavor, or tone of its conscious existence, because again, there was no judgment. This new friend also sensed that I was sensing it on its own level, and a reciprocal dance of mutual recognition was realized together. The recognition of life energy touching life energy. The gorgeous creature moved and danced in a demonstration of its grace and abilities for several minutes, a celebration of morphic resonance and flow that would never be repeated. It is displayed in the swirling patterns of 8 arms and a shape-shifting body, and we received it. This was a turning point in Marcia's experience, too. The thrill of being in contact with the creature was palpable for both of us. She began to feel enlivened, which encouraged me. Just then a group that could have been cast in a movie about clueless tourists rolled in and began to crowd the small room. The energy changed very quickly, and their lack of appreciation for the sanctity of the energy exchange and process was loudly evident. As if continuing our dance, the octopus squeezed behind a jutting rock and disappeared, just as we were squeezed out of the room by the noisy horde. We still felt the soft goodbye from the tank as we left. We drifted over to the giant aquarium that is the deep water viewing area of the puffin and seabird exhibit, looking up about 30 feet to see the surface of the water where the puffins were diving in from above, plunging in smoothly with folded wings, and then half swimming, half water flying down with a comet trail of bubbles as they paddled their feet and flapped their wings in pursuit of the feeder fish. We had somehow missed the top part of that exhibit, even though the puffins had been high on our list. We trekked back upstairs, and as we reached the puffin environment and Marcia took in the rocky cliff sides of the nesting habitat, I could see she was revived and renewed, enchanted with the birds in all phases of nesting, flying, and swimming. A sparkle in her eye as she took another 100 photos of their formal black and white feather tuxedos, their decorative head tassels, and that magnificent grand orange beak that seemed somewhat too large and also perfect somehow. While Marcia was in seventh heaven with the puffins, I felt a sense of relief for her and consequently myself. Then I felt something else. A subtle vibration like some heavy equipment shaking the building, through the concrete floor and the bottoms of my feet. But then I realized it was me. With that, I felt another wave sweep through me, and then as that left, I felt something draining from me, almost as if Marcia and I were in a relay race, and I had passed a baton to her or her to me. As I saw her energy return and her magical enjoyment of the birds, that became the new flow. A crazy feeling like after releasing that baton to her, I was now able to pause this leg of the race. I decided to go out into the atrium connecting the exhibits and sit on a bench. I told her where I was going, and as I exited, I caught a glimpse of an avian flu warning on the door and thought, oh great, we need that too. Feeling suddenly and surprisingly drained now, I sat on a bench watching the seals and sea lions swim their endless loops. They occasionally surfaced in their large but never large enough tanks. I stood up and walked close to the glass. The giant sea lion, many times my size, paused delicately in front of me on her passing lap and looked right into me. I drew in breath as if I needed to sigh, but I couldn't get enough air to complete it. We held our breath together, little bubbles occasionally rising from her nose. In that stillness of no breath, held in the stare of this creature that knew something about cold, there was a chilling sensation beyond earthly temperature, like deep space and then absolute zero. This brutal cold went straight to the center of my soul and my energetic body, precisely at that infinitely small point where we truly are, the place from which we truly exist as we see, hear, and feel the material world through our senses. This incoming sense touched and froze that core. While I felt that deep cold in there, my body flushed and my whole body became hot as fire. My ears became hot. I remembered my kids telling me they could tell I was getting angry by my ears turning red. But I wasn't angry. I was immensely curious about how this absolute zero and this flame could coexist. The contrast was stretching my perception wide open. The sea lion blew a burst of bubbles and swam straight up to the surface. I sat down feeling weak for the first time. A firm but gentle female feeling voice said, "You're going to be very, very sick." It wasn't threatening, frightening, or even foreboding in that moment. In fact, it clicked into place like a remembering of a plan. Not a conscious thought, but a larger sense of, oh yeah, this is how this goes. And so it began with a whisper, this transformation journey. So that's how that started. And I'm just going to add a couple more thoughts here that I brought to the party about fever and processing it. I really have learned that fever in the body is a way of tuning into higher vibrational energies, like a way of shaking out lower vibrational imprints or weight. Many people report experiences of expanded awareness or encounters with entities while feverish. And I believe it's not only a mechanism for the body to combat infection by raising the temperature, but also allows the perception to shift to subtler realms and interactions. Many people will dismiss the lessons or even the experience in totality as it was just a fever hallucination. This is a similar reaction to the way people dismiss the experiences of psychedelics as drug-induced or produced by the drug. And I feel that the psychedelics are really permission slips to get into areas of experience that can rattle the cage of old thinking and wake up one to their truer, larger nature. And I also feel this is proved out by the fact that psychedelic therapies are allowing people to see real results. If they were just hallucinations, they would not provide people the opening to walk away from years of addiction or make significant shifts in treatment-resistant depression or PTSD. So fever access to other dimensional awareness is interesting in many ways too. There's some really good research regarding autistic kids presenting with a fever and having decreases in hyperactivity and irritability, increased eye contact, calmer moods, and improved communication. Something's happening there. So I did a bunch of personal deep research into this as the fevers came and went for several weeks in the hospital that I write about in the book too, and some of the journeys that I went on in that process. But I mentioned in that experience the passing of the baton sensation when Marcia suddenly improved and I took an instantaneous impact of the first of the fevers. And it could have been interpreted at the time that I had taken over something of hers, to our original point of the email. But what I know now is that Marcia senses things coming for days ahead of time. When we do personal retreat work for a client, or family constellation work with others, she often starts some symptomology that can come on suddenly. And after doing this for a while, we know it's not hers. I tend to begin receiving the guidance in broader pictures and dreamtime movies that are about something that fall into place later when we ask about them or realize spontaneously how they fit. For Marcia, time after time, these symptoms of pain or other energy located in different regions of the body have given us aha moments when working with clients, fully realizing what that was about when we get to doing the work and the client's story comes out and it fits in place. I have, by the way, apologized to her for pulling her into this crazy field and making her somewhat of a canary in the coal mine at times for what's coming. But the understanding of that, of what is ours and what isn't, and that when we're doing this healing for ourselves, for our portion of what's happening, that we are doing it for the collective, all of us together. So I feel resolute in my understanding now that in that introduction to that transformation journey in Seward, Alaska, she'd been carrying symptoms of what was coming for me ever since we hit that karmic bubble flying into Alaska. Somehow the preamble of the fever coming on and the encounter with the octopus was necessary for me to get set up for that next phase that she had been curating until that moment arrived when I was ready. And there's more to that. But I just wanted to share that because there's so much more complexity, we could call it, intricacy. I want to call it that. So much more intricacy to how these energies of all of us intertwine and interconnect. And even when we're in opposite parts of the world, and once we've touched each other's hearts and been together in this way, you can't unsee that and or unfeel that. And that's really the blessing of us doing this, I think, is we get to just maybe honor something we don't fully understand and invite each other to live in the mystery of that and to explore how we each experience that, um, and share that. That being said, I did a heck of a lot of talking, and now I would like to just hear anything that brings up for you, or anything for that matter that stirs in your heart.